Well, good morning and welcome to the Men's Leadership Network. Welcome to everyone here live in person. Welcome to everybody who's watching this live streaming at offices around Davidson County, Williamson County, and welcome to anybody that's watching this as a live feed, maybe after the fact. We're glad to have everyone here. Today we're going to discuss legacy. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today. Jimmy Gentry spoke at Brentwood Academy when I was in 8th grade. He spoke on his experiences in World War II, dealing with being one of the first liberators of some death camps in Germany. He spoke on Veterans Day. And I'll tell you personally, from hearing a firsthand account from Mr. Gentry, it impacted me on just the history of that time, but also it had an impact on the way I related with my own grandfather who served at that time. So I'm grateful for his sharing that experience. Jimmy, when he's not sharing his experiences with other organizations nationally, he's working on his farm, he's helping coach football, and he's also still spending time painting and doing other creative expressions. He also runs a day camp for children ages 8 through 13 where they learn to fish, play outdoor games, and compete and work as teams. Jimmy is an American hero who's dedicated his life to helping others in a profound, meaningful way. Please welcome Jimmy Gentry.
All right, well, Mr. Gentry, thank you so much for being here today. It's an honor.
Glad
thank
to be
you.
Here.
Just tell us about yourself, about your family, about your career.
Well, I'm one of 9 children, 5 boys and 4 girls in my family. And we grew up, or I say we, the family, as I remember, me particularly, during the Great Depression and World War II. And so the reason I said that is that's who I am. And those of us around 90 years of age, which is my age, we are World War II and the Great Depression. Draw a line and add them up, that's us. That's where we got our values. So that's where I came from, that during the Great Depression, when we didn't have anything, and didn't anybody else have anything either, so we didn't know anything any better, so we were happy. I remember having a happy childhood, growing up with my brothers and sisters and friends and that sort of thing. So that got me started, and then my daddy dies when I'm 12 years old and leaves my mother with 7 unmarried children to raise and no money at all. And when I say no money, I mean literally no money, not a check that has $2 a week or anything, no money. So we had to do things that nowadays people don't even understand when I say that we had to eat, but we didn't have any money. So we learned to catch rabbits, squirrels, and fish with our hands. And I could do that, and we loved to do that. And that was an adventure. So that's where I started out is with that Great Depression era and living off the land and that sort of thing. So we could talk all day about that, how to catch a rabbit with your hand, how to catch a squirrel with your hand. And
we might have to have you back for that one.
Yeah. It'd take a little while to do that. This table, the big rock underneath that, if we put a hand under there, if there's a big old catfish in there, now they won't do anything sometimes. You just rub on their head, until you get your thumb in their mouth and the fingers in the gill and pull them out. Or what you want him to do is to bite you, and so you run your hand under the rock and he bites you. Well, now your hand's already in his mouth. So that's where you want it. And he has teeth like sandpaper, so don't jerk, you scratch yourself. And now you got him, just pull him out. So those things, just everyday occurrence for us in growing up like that is go out and catch those rascals.
Necessity.
And we literally lived off the land because we didn't have any money.
And then you married, had children. Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know how to describe that other than just do the best I can with it. I married the prettiest girl in the world, and I hope you did, but I know I did. She was born and raised in Franklin, just like me, and her family was well off. We didn't have anything. How we came together, I don't know. She had so many boyfriends, you'd have to sign it in to have a chance to have a date with her. And so I never had a date. I never did have And so the junior senior prom came along one year, and her boyfriend was gone or something, and she didn't have anybody to go to the junior senior prom with her, so she asked me if I would take her. Well, that started a romance that lasted 63 years, and so I was just blessed with her, and the children, our 3 children. So I couldn't ask for anything any better than what I had with her.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you on the outset for your service in the war, and for the legacy that you leave there, and for being willing to tell the stories of what that time was like. How did you come to serve in the Army, and tell us about your experience in World War II?
Oh boy, well, you got 4 or 5 hours here now. And
we do. I think everybody's taking off work today, and we're gonna hold tight.
Well, let me begin with the beginning of the war. I think it's important. December the 7th, 1941, I had been to Sunday school, 4th Avenue Church of Christ, same location it is now. And in those days, we had the Sunday school, and then there'd be a break between Sunday school and regular church service. And we had a habit of going around the corner on Main Street. The only thing open on Sundays was a drugstore. And it was White's Drugstore's time to be open that Sunday morning. We'd go around, we were drinking a Coke, and David Cook was behind the counter, and he said, "Dave, be quiet, be quiet." And he turned the radio up, and we hear for the first time that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. Wow. December the 7th, 1941. I remember where I was standing. I remember who I was talking with. I remember what the radio looked like. It made such an impression on me that particular day. And then, as I said, as a 16-year-old, I witnessed the greatest display of patriotism this country's ever seen, because all those young men are older than I am. I was at that time, 2, 3, 4 years older. Couldn't wait to get into service. And my brother was one of those. He was not quite, had to be 18 when he was still 17. And he would go down to the corner of 5 Points with a rock fence. And Mr. Lanier was in charge, and he wanted to go. Well, Mr. Lanier said, "David, you can't go. You're 17. You got to be 18. He'd go down every day. And he became a pest, I think. So one day, Mr. Lanier gave him some papers, said, "David, go take these home and get your mother to sign them, and we'll take you." So he runs up. We moved into town then after my daddy died. He runs up 5th Avenue and gets my mother to sign the papers, comes down, gives them back to him, gets on the bus. That's the last time we saw him. He was killed. And so that's the kind of patriotism I'm talking about in those days. And December the 7th, 1941, changed the world forever. It's never been the same since. So that was the beginning of it, and he took his training, and then my time came. I wanted to be in the Air Force because Cleveland Kennard Jr., they owned a swimming pool at that time, his daddy did, and he was a pilot. And not only a pilot, he was a good one. And in fact, he became America's #2 ace in World War II. He shot down 33 and a half German planes. Wow. And how to get a half, some other pilot hit the same plane. And so he would come home before I went into service and have his uniform on, a white scarf around his neck. Boy, I wanted to be just like him. So I volunteered. I was going to go in the Air Force. And when the doctor examined me, he said, "You can't get in the Air Force." I said, "What do you mean?" "You got color vision problem." I had not total color blind, but problem with it. And he said, I remember what he said. I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" He said, "You go home to the Army, it'll take anybody." And so I went from wanting to fly to a foot soldier, just like that. And so that was the beginning of it. And I don't know whether you want to go on with it or not, but I can go right on through the whole war.
Well, tell us about the most difficult moment in the war for you.
Well, let me do it like this. They cut our training short. You're supposed to have 16 weeks. And you historians will pick up on this right away. Why did they cut our training short? Well, they cut our training short a whole month, and we didn't even get to come home before we went overseas. First thing you know, and by the way, I'd never been out of the state of Tennessee before in my life. Now, next thing I know, I'm in New York. Next thing I know, I'm in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and boy, that thing goes and goes and goes. And I had never seen anything bigger than the Harpeth River down here. You could jump across there. And so here we go, a month early from training, and so they knew something was happening or about to happen, and then the first thing you know, you're in England, Liverpool, we landed in Liverpool, didn't stay that long, right off everything just kept moving is what I'm trying to say. Something was going on and they needed soldiers fast, and that's the reason they had us there. Then the first thing you know, we're on the LST, that's the one that lets the front down. We crossed the English Channel and let the front down, there's France. I've already read about France and all that sort of thing, but here it is, and it's cold. It's the Battle of the Bulge, you already figured it out, hadn't you? Battle of the Bulge. So that was my first part of the war, was being in the Battle of the Bulge. Nearly froze to death. I had a friend, my foxhole buddy was Charlie Thiessen, and Charlie lived in New York. He talked funny. I didn't think I did, but they kept asking me to say that again. I thought they couldn't hear in the North. I didn't realize they wanted me to say words that they'd never heard before. And so we were foxhole buddies, and he would say this. He'd say, "Okay, take your boots off," and I would, and he'd rub my feet until it hurt. And if they hurt, you got feeling in them. And then I'd rub his feet until it hurt. And that's how we saved. Had two guys in the foxhole just across from us and said that their feet was not cold. Both of them had to have toes amputated. They had frostbite. So that's the beginning of it. My episode in the war was being dug into during those cold days during the Battle of the Bulge, and I could just go on talking about what happened in those days. And then finally, I'll just briefly go through it with you, and then we can come back and pick up parts of it you want to. But when the weather began to change, and by the way, we knew our weather forecaster was, if planes are flying, weather's good. If there's no planes up, either German planes or ours, there's no good. If it's bad weather, if they're not up. And so after being in those foxholes for we were in there about 3 to 4 weeks, and then finally we jumped off. That means we move. And we move, not like the movies have it, you get out and all the big lines go across the fields and all that sort of thing. That wasn't the way we moved. We moved single file, scout out front, and then you follow him, and follow him 5 yards apart, and here you go. I'll tell you what I'll do for you. I'll do one situation, and I could do this 13 times. The city that I'm going to take for you is Würzburg, Germany. We walk all day, and the Germans didn't stop us. We wondered what's going on. Where are they? We should have known better. But anyway, we're walking 5 yards apart, and you can't call time out. You say, "Well, I don't feel good. I don't think I'll go today." No, you do go today too. Yeah, but my foot's hurt. You keep going. There's no excuse. You keep moving 5 yards apart, 5 yards apart. If you have to relieve yourself, you run ahead and relieve yourself, get back in line, because you're responsible not only for yourself, but the man in front of you. And we walked all day and didn't meet any opposition. I said, "Well, where are they? They quit, I guess." No, they hadn't. Night comes, and I can remember this night just as well. We just kept walking. We don't know where we're going. The officers know, but we don't. They don't tell you. And we just kept moving. And I remember this, about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, I went to sleep walking. And it's not what you think. You don't say, "Oh, I'm sleepy." You just walk, all of a sudden, whoomp, I hit the ground. I had to wake you up every time. Hit the ground, get back up, and keep walking. Well, what they were doing, it was trying to get us to that city of Würzburg, Germany, before dawn the next morning. See, we didn't know this, but that's what they were doing, because we had to cross a river, get into the city, and those rubber rafts we used, they pick us off into water from the buildings in the city. And so we got there right at dawn and got across over on the other side. Now, keep up with me. We've already walked all day. We've already walked all night. Hadn't had any sleep, hadn't had anything to eat. Now we're in combat. We fight all day long. I have to tell you this. It doesn't mean a thing to any of you, I suppose. and I can't figure it out. I remember once we got on that side of the river with them, and they in the buildings, in the rubble, some of the buildings were still burning. I was backed up against a wall, and I hear a door open right beside me, and I pushed the safety off on my rifle, and the man comes out, and he has a nicest looking gentleman, white hair, black suit, and he was saying, "Thank God you Americans are here," in perfect English. Who is this guy? This doesn't mean a thing in history, but he goes off. Well, we worked our way on up through the buildings a little bit, and he's laying dead in the street. Somebody shot him. I think he may have been an American sympathizer or something, but we didn't shoot him. The Germans evidently did. But that was the beginning of it, and then so we fight all day. And I'll do this one for you. The Americans didn't purposely destroy churches. Two reasons. One for religion, respect for religion, and the other one was that those church steeples sticking up in the rubble of the city gave us a reference point. That's why we say 2 fingers to the right or 3 fingers to the left. We can't offer that steeple. And so the church was there, and the Germans knew that, so they were in the church. And I can do this. It's not much fun for me to do, but they was in that church, and we had worked our way up to the church. Sergeant Randy McDavid is here on my left. He's from South Carolina. And we were trying to decide where the machine guns that they were using were coming from in the church, above somewhere. And while we were talking about it, trying to decide that, he dies. They shot him while I was talking to him. So you're that close to death, you're within arm's length. Then another one over here goes down. And then finally someone yells out, "If we don't get out of here, they're going to kill us all." So we jumped up, ran across the street, and went into church with them, which was a good move on our part because we went into church, and I'll come back to that again in a minute. We trapped them above us now. Now they can't come down. So we didn't plan it that way, but that's how it happened. And now we silenced that church that day. But the reason I wanted to come back to that, I was really surprised. When we ran in that church, there must have been 25 or 30 coffins, caskets in there, waiting to be buried. The death was unbelievable in those cities from bombings and whatnot. And so we fight all that day, and then night comes. We fight again. The night is a weird night in combat is that there's no lights except a little flickering of light from a burning building maybe. But the Germans wore hobnail shoes, and you could hear them in the streets running. And we couldn't see them, but we could hear them down there. And we got in this building and stayed there all night. And I don't want to get you lost here, but we've already go back, walk all day, walk all night, fight all day, fight all night. The next day we get into the middle of the city, into a park. Remember, I hadn't had any sleep yet. And I remember in that city park, there's shrubbery and all that sort of thing. And I picked out a big tree. I was getting behind it. It didn't help, though, because they were all around us. It was a terrible mistake on our part to get in there. They were in the buildings around us. A bullet, when it goes by your ear, it pops. And so pop. Take a rubber band, pop a piece of paper with it. That's what a bullet sounds like. And I remember I was in E Company. There was a guy from G Company behind us, and he hollered up at me. He said, "They're after you." I said, "I know it. I couldn't get away from them." Twigs were falling around me from shrubs and sort of thing. And a bullet came and hit my helmet right above my left eye. If it had been this way, it would kill me. I went this way. And when it did, it saved my life because, bam, and I just fell on my face. I was already down on my hands and knees, and they thought they'd kill me, so they quit shooting. Wow. So that's how close you get to it. And then you lose a buddy here, you lose one here, that friend. And so we finished that day, and company commander said, "We're going to stop right here tonight." And he didn't have to say it a second time because everybody was asleep by the time he said that. Going to 2 days and 2 nights without any sleep. And we finally secured the city. Anyway, so that's one. I could go through several other situations like that. And my point in telling that is that here I am, 18, 19 years old, and catching rabbit, squirrels, and fish back home. Now I'm in the way of death all around you. And so you grow up pretty fast there. I might do that. I might share this with you that I think would be appropriate for us to hear this. Is the first time that I went into combat, we were in a French village. This is during the Battle of the Bulge, in a French village, and they found a room upstairs in an old bombed-out building that had a stove in there, and it was freezing cold. We burned anything we could find. And Michael Sismary was from Chicago. He was in our squad, and he's the first real live Yankee I'd ever seen up close. And so old Michael was sitting over in the corner leaning against the wall, and he was older than the rest of us. And neither shaved, and he was just smoking a cigar, and just, oh man, he was talking big. And I said, golly, these guys in Chicago, they're bad news, you know. And we just go watch Michael. He'll whip them all by himself, you know. And he just used bad language. Oh gosh, my mama would get him. And so, anyway, he was just talking. And so finally, when we did jump off and got in the back of a truck, they could take us into, this is going into the combat the first time. You asked her, this fear, this is where fear really grabs you. This is the first time we were going in, and we got in the back of this truck, and so crowded in there, you didn't have room for anybody else, and they pulled the tarpaulin down, and there's no light. See, we couldn't strike a match while the whole time was there. We got in that truck, pulled the tarpaulin down. The truck's going to drive us a little ways. And it's so quiet in the back of that truck that you could hear everybody breathing. We were going into combat for the first time. And I remember hearing Michael over to my left mumbling. And then I realized what I had to do. I went to God. I prayed, God, please take care of me. Please take care of me. And finally, the truck stops and lets us out, and we walked the rest of the way. Michael was dead, and on the third day, he was killed. So we went through that sort of thing more than once, and then we moved from that town to the next village, and so on. And sometimes we wouldn't meet any opposition. Sometimes we meet a lot of opposition. And so that's just a story that I can remember all of it. I've been blessed with memory. I've been back to Europe once, and I went back to some of these places where I had walked. I've been back to the very village, to the very town, and all those sorts of things.
Will you tell us when the war ended and going into the concentration camp?
Okay, when we went to the concentration camp before the war ended. Let me do that first then. We had been through places like Schweinfurt and Wurzburg and Nuremberg, and we knew that the war was getting close to being over, because we were moving pretty fast, and the Germans were surrendering by the thousands. And this whole army was surrendering. They'd come in, we were going this way. And so I put it like this: it's sort of like a football game. You're ahead by 4 touchdowns, 2 minutes on the clock, and we got the ball. It's over. Just run the clock out. And so this was April 29th, 1945. It sticks in my memory. And we were moving pretty fast, and it's all over. In fact, we were even talking about, what are you going to do when you get home? And then all of a sudden, April 29th, we looked down ahead of us and see these walls, high as these walls, or higher than these walls in here. And some sort of camp. We don't know what it is. Just a camp. And you could put all of Franklin inside of it. It's a huge place. And we said, well, this is a German army camp. We don't know what it is. But there was a terrible smell. And we had 2 or 3 guys to throw up just from the smell, not from seeing something, but from the smell. And so we go down, and there's railroad going into I remember going down on the right corner, going to the northwest corner of that wall, and some boxcars were on the outside. You couldn't see inside, but obviously there was some boxcars inside. So we go down and go around the end of the car to go to the gate on the opposite side and open the doors, and that's where the smell was coming from. It was 1,000 dead bodies. A human body smells worse than a cow, a horse, a cat, a dog, or anything like that. That's where that terrible smell of rotten bodies, arms and legs no bigger than the broomstick, their legs about like that. And I said, God, I can't believe, what is this? And I asked my buddy Charlie, I said, Charlie, who are these people? And then he said, they're Jews. And when he said that, I thought of Mr. Martin Turner back in Franklin, Tennessee. He was Jewish, that used to buy my furs when I was trapping in those days. I didn't understand it. Why are the Jews? I didn't understand. There were 32,000 dead bodies. And I found out later, I did some research on it, that train had come from Krakow, Poland. I didn't know this at the time. I didn't even consider it. We just know what to do next. And they moved them to get them away from the Russian army and had them locked in those boxcars without food. They died, been dead several days before we ever got there. And then we overran them there. And I might say this, had we not gotten there when we did, I wouldn't tell this story, because they would have burned the bodies and I wouldn't have ever known it. Wouldn't anybody ever known it? Wow. Because when we went into the camp, they had one room, there's nothing but dead bodies piled up, just like a wood stove. You just feed the stove, burning the bodies. And this was at Dachau concentration camp. And so that was the experience there. Then from there, I remember very well, I was so glad to get away from that place. I want to get away from here. I don't want to be in here any longer. Get out of here. And we left and went on to the end of the war. The end of the war ended on the Czechoslovakian border. And I remember going into combat, praying, God, please take care of me. And then when word came on the Czechoslovakian border that the Germans had surrendered, it was over. I went down to a field close by the Salzach River and got down on my knees and I prayed to God, thank you, God, for taking care of me. So I briefly covered several months right there.
It's incredible. What is it, switching gears, what is it that you wish that we could learn from the past so that we don't repeat it?
Well, I don't know how. The world has evil people in it. And I don't know what we can learn about how to control these evil people, peace-loving people, and then you have those that are not peace-loving, that want to cause problems and all that sort of thing. So I can't really answer your question other than just pray to God that we won't have to go through another situation like this. World War II was a total war. And as I said, my brother was killed, my friends were killed. There was 13 boys in my graduating class. 6 of us survived, 7 didn't come home from World War II of the 13. And so war is a horrible thing. And so if we just, all I can answer to that is pray to God that we can not have people like that again in this world.
Mr. Gentry, what do you want your legacy to be in life?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm trying to live a life that maybe, that I don't want to use this word, but I don't know a better word, that my life shines, that there's some light coming from Him. And I want to do that. I want to be that kind of life. Because I've had a good life. I can't complain. I think a lot of things I wish didn't happen and hadn't happened, but all in all, I thank God for my life, and I've had experiences in my life that have just meant the world to me, and I just hope that people, somebody somewhere that needs some help will say, you know, that old boy, he was all right. He was all right. I don't want to I don't want to leave a legacy where somebody says, well, oh, you know, he sneaked around, he did that, he didn't. I don't want that kind of, I don't want to do that. I want to be a shining light somewhere, somehow. I don't know whether that's answering your question or not.
Oh, that's great.
But anyway.
You've been blessed with a lot of opportunities to influence a lot of people in our community, from coaching 66 years to being in schools to inviting kids to come to the farm. One of the things you do is you tell them 5 most important words.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us those words.
Now, they're homemade now. Some of them have somebody better than theirs. Well, the 5 most important words to me was, I am proud of you. Think about that. And the reason I got those 5 words was a teacher I had once in school. I did something, I don't remember what it was, and it's Miss Josephine's words, as a matter of fact. Miss Josephine said, I'm proud of you. Boy, I felt 100 feet tall just because she said she was proud of me. May I help you? 4 words. 3 words, you can't beat them. I love you. 2 words, thank you. And the most important word is not I, it's we. We can do all things through him that gives us strength. Wow. I just made those up but it satisfies me over the years.
Well, that's an incredible takeaway. We're blessed by that. We all have a lot of people in our lives that we probably need to follow those up with and tell our kids and tell the people that we work with, I'm proud of you. That I'm thankful for you.
Yeah.
And together we do make an incredible difference.
Don't forget, I love you.
I love you.
I love you.
Wow. Well, we have time for some questions, and so men have been submitting those this morning. Thomas?
That's right. We've got a couple questions that have come in. The first question here is, we're coming up on a new year. What are your goals for 2016?
All right, so we're coming up on a new year, Mr. Gentry. Do you have goals for 2016?
Well, yes, I want to be here at the end of the year.
Yes.
No, I don't. I'm not kidding there either. But I have a wonderful family, and I want them to stay healthy and strong. And I want all the people around me to be comfortable and know that the good Lord is looking after them.
That's good. Another question?
Yeah, we got a second one here. What would you tell a young man at the beginning of his career who wants to make a difference with his life? How do you do that?
So what would you tell a young man at the beginning of his career who wants to make a difference with his life, how to do that?
Well, spend a lot of time on your knees, praying. As I said, that going into combat back in those days when I was scared, but I felt comfortable after I prayed to God to take care of me. I can remember when I was sitting in the truck, I remember who was around me, all that, and I just find that you can't beat that. God's always close to you. He's right here with us now, and he'll listen to you anytime you want to talk to him. So that's my advice, to just stay close to God, and you'll be all right.
It's incredible.
You'll be all right.
Thomas, do we have another question?
Yeah, this is a great one. You mentioned the values you acquired during the Great Depression and World War II in your introduction. What values do you feel we need to encourage the most in raising our children and our grandchildren?
So, you mentioned the values that you learned growing up in the Great Depression and serving in the war. What are the values that we need to instill in our children?
Well, first thing that comes to my mind is hard work. Some people, they use the expression, I'm not scared of work. I lay down right beside and take a nap, things like that. They're making a little fun of it, but you've got to work. Anybody that tries to get through without works, they're not going to make it. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to be satisfied. So work as long as you can, as hard as you can, and have a goal out there in front of you that you're going to. And at my age now, my goal is pretty close, I think. I know where I'm going, I want to go, and So I think that everybody needs to have a goal. They don't just say, I don't know what's going to happen to me today, let's do this, do that. I think they need to look ahead and say, I want to do this someday. I want to be this way someday. Have a goal to work for.
That's incredible. Thank you.
We've got one last one that came in. Mr. Gentry, combat is a traumatic experience. How did you personally see God's hand at work as you were in combat?
It says, combat was a traumatic experience. How did you see God work while you were in combat?
Well, I know this. Michael Sismary, the guy from Chicago, he was a tough guy. But I couldn't rely on him. He had problems of his own. I got problems. I just feel like the more I think about God being close to me, and I pray every day, maybe 10, 15 times a day. I talk to God, pray to him, keep him close. And then when you get there, he won't be a stranger. He'll say, I've been knowing you a long time. And so I don't know whether I'm answering your question again or not, but that's the best I can do, I think.
Yeah, the worst words we could ever hear are, depart from me, I never knew you. The best words we could hear are, welcome, good and faithful servant.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I love that.
That's a good way to put it.
Mr. Gentry, on behalf of all the men who are here and all the men who are watching at home and all the men you've influenced through the years, I just want to say thank you. You're a hero, and you are leaving an incredible legacy just by telling your story and letting us learn from it. So thank you for being here today. Would you guys join me in thanking Mr. Gentry? We have one more week of our Men's Leadership Network breakfast for this semester, and Thomas will tell us about that in a moment. But before we transition out of that, I'd like to pray for us today.
Absolutely.
Father, we are incredibly blessed by the way you move through people's lives. Thank you for moving in Mr. Gentry's life, and thank you for allowing him to pass down to us the story of your power. We are not engaged in a world war right now, God, thankfully and graciously, but we face battles every day. And whatever battle we're facing, we know that we can take his words to heart, hit our knees, and we'll make it through. Father, thank you for that. Thank you for Christ and the legacy of salvation that he gives us. And thank you for the light that we're able to see through other followers of yours that point us back in your direction. I ask your blessings on Mr. Gentry, his farm, his family, and his life. In Jesus' name we pray today. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Gentry. That was fantastic. We all probably will make some trips out to the farm over the next couple of weeks. Enjoy this fall time. So if you guys are like me and you just could sit here for hours and hours and hours and hear Mr. Gentry tell stories of his past and experiences, then this is a fantastic resource for you. This is An American Life, written by Jimmy Gentry. It chronicles his growing up here in Franklin, as well as his experiences in the war and coming back afterwards. So this book is available to you at the back. Mr. Gentry has brought a handful of copies. They are signed, so you can pick those up in the back. I believe they're $20 a book, so they're back there for you. If you want to learn more on spiritual leadership, this is kind of the go-to. This is by Henry and Richard Blackaby. It's kind of, I've read through about half of this book, and the real theme here is moving people to God's agenda. So what would it look like, and if instead of pursuing your own agenda or society's agenda, we really took some time and figured out, what is Christ calling us to? What is his agenda? And then how do we as leaders begin to move people onto his agenda? So a fantastic resource for you. Again, Spiritual Leadership by Henry and Richard Blackaby. So those are your resources. Nick mentioned next week. Next week is our last week for the fall. We're going to have Tim Corbin here. Tim Corbin is, of course, the head men's baseball coach at Vanderbilt for the Commodores. He took the Doors to the College World Series the last 2 years, won the whole thing in 2014. So he's going to be speaking with us next week. You don't want to miss it. We're going to be talking about raising great kids. So we'll start with breakfast at 6:30, and we'll get going with the program at 7. Hope to see you next week.